Most people never realize that the life they are living right now is not the result of fate, luck, or circumstance. It is the result of rehearsed thoughts, memorized emotions, and unconscious habits repeated so many times that they have become an identity. You did not choose most of them. You inherited them. You absorbed them. You practiced them until your nervous system believed they were you. And the moment you understand this, not intellectually but viscerally, you take your first step out of the past and into the present, because the present moment is the only place where change can begin. Your personality is shaping your personal reality. Every thought you think sends a signal. Every emotion you feel is chemical information. Every reaction you repeat conditions your body to live in the same tomorrow as yesterday. And the body, once conditioned, becomes the mind. It begins to anticipate the familiar. It begins to crave the known, even if the known is painful, limiting, or self-sabotaging. This is why people say they want change, yet live in the same emotional patterns for decades, because the body has memorized the past and the mind obeys the body more often than the other way around. But here is the truth that most people are never taught. You are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, and you are not your past experiences. You are the awareness observing them. And the moment you become conscious of what was once unconscious, you loosen its grip on you. Awareness is the great disruptor. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. Right now, as you are listening or reading, your brain is forming connections. Your neurons are either reinforcing the old patterns or preparing for something new. And if you are truly present, if you are not distracted, not analyzing, not waiting for this to end, then something subtle but powerful is happening. You are stepping out of automatic living. You are interrupting the program. And interruption is the doorway to transformation. Most people wake up in the morning and immediately reconnect to their identity, the same thoughts, the same concerns, the same emotional baseline, the same story about who they are and what is possible. They don't realize they are remembering themselves into existence. And by noon, they are emotionally predictable. By evening, they are neurologically identical to the day before. This is not life. This is repetition. But transformation does not begin by changing the external world. It begins by observing the internal one without judgment. The moment you notice a habitual thought without becoming it, you weaken it. The moment you feel an old emotion without acting it out, you reclaim energy. And reclaimed energy is the raw material of change. Think about this carefully. Every emotion you feel is fueling a future. Stress rehearses survival. Gratitude rehearses growth. Fear rehearses contraction. Inspiration rehearses expansion. Your body does not know the difference between a real experience and emotionally charged thought. So when you relive the past emotionally, your body is living there again, chemically, neurologically, biologically. And as long as you are emotionally anchored to the past, you cannot step into a new future. This is why willpower alone rarely works. You cannot think your way out of an emotional habit. You must feel your way into a new identity. And that requires presence, real presence, the kind where you are no longer running from silence, no longer addicted to stimulation, no longer avoiding yourself. Because when the noise fades, the truth rises. There will be a moment, if you allow it, where you realize how often you live in reaction. Reaction to people, reaction to memories, reaction to expectations, reaction to fear. And reaction is the language of the past. Creation, on the other hand, is the language of the future. You cannot create from reaction. You can only create from intention. The person you want to become already exists as possibility. Not someday, not when conditions change, not when someone gives you permission. That version of you exists right now in the field of potential. And the only thing separating you from that version is who you are being emotionally, mentally, and energetically in this moment. So the real question is not, what do I want? The real question is, who must I stop being? Who would you be without the story? Who would you be without the memory? Who would you be without the emotion that keeps you anchored to an old self? When you let go of the known, even briefly, you enter the unknown. And the unknown is uncomfortable because it has no familiar identity. But it is also where all new possibilities exist. This is the void. This is the creative space. This is where the old self dissolves and something greater can emerge. Most people are afraid of the unknown because they have mistaken predictability for safety. But the truth is, growth requires uncertainty. Evolution requires discomfort. Expansion requires you to leave the emotional environment you've been living in. And the moment you choose curiosity over fear, presence over habit, awareness over reaction, you begin to rewire your brain and recondition your body for a new future. This is not philosophy. This is biology. Neurons that no longer fire together no longer wire together. Emotional circuits that are not rehearsed begin to weaken. And new circuits, new identities can be formed through intentional repetition of elevated states. Every time you choose gratitude instead of complaint, courage instead of avoidance, awareness instead of autopilot, you are casting a vote for a new self, and that self is not built in one dramatic moment. It is built in quiet decisions, invisible choices, internal victories no one applauds, the moment you pause instead of react, the moment you observe instead of judge, the moment you breathe instead of escape. These moments matter more than you think because they are signals. And the body is always listening. If you can sit with yourself long enough to notice the patterns without becoming them, you will feel a shift, a loosening, a lightness, as if energy that was trapped in the past is returning to you. That energy is yours. It always was. You just forgot, and remembering, that is the beginning. Once you break the emotional and mental attachment to the old self, you create space. And space is not emptiness, it is potential. Most people rush to fill that space with more noise, more distraction, more thinking, but the ones who truly change learn to remain there, to linger in the unknown long enough for something new to organize itself. Because the future does not arrive from effort alone, it arrives from coherence. Your brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly scanning the environment and the body, asking one question over and over again: what is likely to happen next based on what has already happened before? And if the answer is always based on the past, then the future can only be a replay. But when you interrupt that prediction, when you introduce a new emotional signal, you begin to train the brain to expect something different. This is where intention becomes powerful. Intention is not wishful thinking. Intention is a clear mental picture combined with an elevated emotional state. When thought and emotion are aligned, the body begins to believe in the future before it happens. And belief is not an idea, it is a physiological state. It is when the body is no longer living in survival, no longer anchored to fear, no longer addicted to stress, but instead begins to operate from trust, openness, and readiness. Most people try to create a new life while emotionally rehearsing the old one. They visualize success while feeling unworthy. They affirm abundance while feeling lack. They say they want love while carrying resentment. And the body always wins because the body is the subconscious mind. It responds to how you feel, not what you say. So the work is not to force a new future. It is to become familiar with the emotional state of that future. Ask yourself, if this future were already real, how would I feel in my body? Not in theory, in chemistry, in breath, in posture, in energy. Would you feel lighter, more open, more grounded, more grateful? That feeling is the signature of the future calling you forward. And here is the key. You cannot wait for the external world to change before you feel that way. You must generate the feeling first. Because emotion is the language the body understands, and the body is the instrument through which reality is experienced. When you practice elevated emotions, gratitude, joy, inspiration, love, you are not pretending. You are training your nervous system. You are conditioning your body to live in a new emotional environment. And over time, what was once unfamiliar becomes natural. What was once difficult becomes automatic. And this is how identity changes, not overnight, but through repetition with awareness. There will be resistance. That resistance is not failure, it is evidence. It is the old self fighting for survival, because every identity wants to remain consistent. Every emotional pattern wants to be validated. When you feel the pull to return to impatience, frustration, or doubt, that is not a sign to stop. That is the moment to stay present, to breathe, to observe, to choose again. Think of it this way. Every time you overcome an emotional habit, you liberate energy, and that energy becomes available for creation. The greater the habit you overcome, the more energy you free. This is why growth often feels uncomfortable. It requires energy to move from one state to another. But on the other side of that discomfort is expansion. Now imagine waking up each day not to remember who you were, but to practice who you are becoming. Imagine rehearsing gratitude before checking your phone. Imagine setting your emotional tone before the world tries to set it for you. Imagine choosing intention over reaction, presence over prediction, creation over survival. This is not passive. This is mastery. When your thoughts are clear and your emotions are elevated, your brain and heart begin to synchronize. Your internal signals become coherent. And coherence is power. It is when your body is no longer broadcasting mixed messages. It is when your energy becomes organized instead of fragmented. And an organized system produces measurable effects. You begin to notice subtle changes. Your reactions soften, your patience deepens, your focus sharpens. Opportunities seem to appear, not because the world changed, but because you did. Your perception expanded, your awareness refined. You began to see what was always there but invisible to the old self. This is the paradox. When you stop chasing the future and start embodying it, it comes to meet you. When you stop trying to control outcomes and start aligning internally, life reorganizes externally, not always instantly, not always dramatically, but inevitably, and you will reach a moment, quiet, unannounced, where you realize that you are no longer the same person who started this journey. The things that once triggered you no longer have power. The thoughts that once defined you now pass like clouds. The emotions that once ruled you now inform you without controlling you. This is not suppression. This is transcendence. You are not becoming someone else. You are remembering who you were before conditioning told you who to be, before fear became familiar, before stress became normal, before limitation became logical. You are returning to coherence, to wholeness, to agency, and from this state, action becomes effortless. You do not force discipline. You feel inspired to move. You do not push for clarity. It arises naturally. You do not chase motivation. You embody it, because motivation is not something you get. It is something you generate when your inner world is aligned. In the final section, we will bring this into completion. We will move from practice into embodiment, from moments of coherence into a way of living, from becoming into being. This is where the change becomes permanent. There comes a moment in every true transformation when effort dissolves into embodiment, when the practices that once required intention become natural, when the emotions that once felt elevated now feel like home. This is the moment when change stops being something you know and becomes something you are. And this is the moment most people never reach, not because it is impossible, but because it requires consistency without immediate reward, presence without constant validation, and faith without visible proof. Embodiment means that your nervous system has learned a new baseline. Your body no longer wakes up prepared for stress. Your mind no longer searches for problems to solve in order to feel safe. Your emotions are no longer reactive echoes of the past, but signals of alignment with the present. You are no longer managing your life. You are inhabiting it. This is when your energy changes, and energy is not mystical. It is measurable. It is the sum total of how coherent your thoughts, emotions, and actions are. When they are aligned, you feel whole. When they are fragmented, you feel drained. Most people live fragmented lives, leaking energy through worry, regret, comparison, and self-doubt. But when you live in alignment, energy returns. Vitality increases. Clarity sharpens. Presence deepens. You begin to trust yourself, not because everything goes perfectly, but because you know how to respond, you know how to return to center, you know how to observe instead of react, to choose instead of repeat. And this self-trust becomes the foundation of confidence, not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet certainty that you can meet life as it is without losing yourself. From this place, your actions change. You speak differently. You listen more deeply. You move with intention, and people feel it, not because you tell them, but because coherence is contagious. When someone is grounded, present, and emotionally regulated, they create safety in others. They elevate the environment simply by being in it. And this is how personal change becomes collective influence. You do not need to convince anyone. You do not need to preach or perform. Your embodiment becomes the message. Your presence becomes the teaching. And the world responds to who you are being far more than what you are saying. But here's the truth that keeps this real. Embodiment is not a destination. It is a practice. There will be days when the old self whispers. There will be moments when stress tries to reclaim familiar territory. This is not regression, it is integration. The difference now is that you notice sooner, you recover faster, you choose more consciously, you understand that emotions are not enemies, they are messengers. The challenges are not obstacles, they are invitations to deepen your alignment. That discomfort is not a signal to escape, it is a signal to expand. And with this understanding, life stops happening to you and starts happening through you. You no longer wait for permission to feel whole. You no longer postpone joy for someday. You no longer outsource your power to circumstances. You generate your state internally, and the external world becomes a reflection rather than a requirement. This is freedom, not from responsibility, but from unconsciousness. And something remarkable happens when you live this way. Synchronicities increase. Opportunities align, conversations open doors, ideas arrive fully formed, not because you are lucky, but because you are receptive, because your mind is no longer crowded with noise, because your body is no longer addicted to stress, because your awareness is no longer confined to the past. You begin to live in a state of participation with life instead of resistance to it. You listen more closely, you respond more wisely, you move with timing instead of force. And this timing, this alignment is what many people call flow. But flow is not accidental. It is the result of internal coherence sustained. Over time, at this level, gratitude is no longer a practice, it is a perception. You see value where you once saw problems. You see growth where you once saw struggle. You see meaning where you once saw randomness. And meaning changes everything. It gives direction to effort and depth to experience. You realize that the moment you stop trying to become someone and simply allow yourself to be, life meets you there. Not with perfection, but with authenticity. Not with certainty, but with possibility. And possibility is enough. So as this journey completes, understand this. You are not finished. You are initiated. You have stepped out of unconscious repetition and into conscious creation. You have learned how to interrupt the past, embody the future, and live in the present. And this skill, this awareness, will serve you in every area of your life. Return to it often. Refine it gently. Live it honestly. Because the greatest transformation is not the one that changes your circumstances. It is the one that changes who you are when you face them. And when you live from that place, the future is no longer something you wait for. It is something you become